they're taking care of patients or they're running the organization from the C-suite. Like, they shouldn't have to know that. That's why
they got us.
Yeah.
there you guys go.
Helps them understand what's the best use of, their capital, which, we all know is in healthcare especially, is challenged.
Architects show me what can be built there. And that doesn't really translate to what may be the actual organizational needs.
This is the Construction Insiders Podcast. I'm Jessica Busch, bringing you the newest trends and strategies in construction, essential to anyone in the industry.
Welcome to the Construction Insiders Podcast, where we go beyond the blueprints and get into real conversations about what is shaping the built environment today. I'm your host, Jessica Busch, and today we're going to dive into a topic that sits at the intersection of strategy, capital, and infrastructure: healthcare facilities master planning. I'm joined today by two guests that'll help us really dive in to what's going on and the nuances behind it all. We have Bill Foulkes, Executive Vice President at Cumming Group, where he helps healthcare organizations really navigate the complex capital programs and infrastructure decisions they face on a daily basis. And we have Judd Orlando, Executive Director of Facility Planning and Infrastructure at City of Hope. Welcome. Thank you for taking the time out of your busy days to join us.
Great. Thank you for having us.
For those who may need a quick warm-up, when we're talking about facilities master plans, what do most people in the C-suite think it means, and how far off are they from what they think it means and what it really means in reality?
That's a great question. What I find is that there really is no true definition of master planning. Master planning can mean so many different things, and to so many different leaders, they look at what they're trying to get as outcomes, and they may not understand the breadth of what they could be accomplishing. At the heart, it's about aligning organizational strategy with the capital decisions that need to be made, and being the connective tissue there. What I find is that oftentimes leaders think that it's a static experience that they're going to go through, where they're going to get a single document, something that I think of it as a binder of material.
So that static document is very far from what this is in reality.
I think for some it is. The static document is what is needed, whether it be for a board or the CEO that's what they want as output. Mm-hmm. In some cases, what it does is it can tee up the next big thing. It can tee up that next building or that next development opportunity that's in front of them. But everybody's output is different. The way that we as facility leaders, as consultants, architects, go into it, we should be approaching it with, we are building a living framework and something that no matter what happens to the strategy is adaptable.
And so where does the master plan lie in this continuum, Bill?
Yeah, I think it really starts with the organizational goals. The organizational strategic goals are the cornerstone to developing a facility master plan. Those drive what the decisions need to be made in terms of facilities, either new facilities or existing facilities. And so that continuum really starts with the organizational strategies. And those strategies that they develop are typically annual,
okay,
right? And so what happens is the strategies that are developed for the organization change over time. Therefore, your facility master plans should change over time as well.
Yeah, I would just add that oftentimes, if you put yourself in the mindset of a C-suite leader, whether they have come from differing backgrounds, but oftentimes they don't come from facilities. And so when organizations put together strategic master plans, they have these big visions for, especially in healthcare. There's a lot of exciting advancements. I work in the cancer research and treatment area currently, and what you find is that sometimes there are leaders that maybe came up through different backgrounds, and they haven't had the experience of the facilities planning. And so our job is to translate their strategy into tangible development opportunities that we can take advantage of, and do that in such a way that helps them understand what's the best use of their capital, which we all know is in healthcare especially is challenged.
So, and when we're talking about different ways of looking at this, we've heard, the volume master plan, volume-based, versus design-based. What is the difference? What does it matter? Bill, can you walk us through
Sure, I'll
that?
start off. I'm sure Judd can add to this as well.
Yeah.
Historically, there's been two kickoffs to master plans.
Okay.
One's been very much a design-based master plan where in the past, CEOs have come in and said, I want to build something. Architects show me what can be built there. And that doesn't really translate to what may be the actual organizational needs. The actual organizational needs are very much foundational to demographics, volume projections, and translating that into what the future needs, whether it's bed needs, ORs, whatever that is, that will be able to actually drive revenue for the organization. Volume projections is a very interesting topic to me because there are it's a little bit of a black box. There are two pieces to that. One is the demographic growth to a specific location, and the second is the amount of market share that an organization is going to achieve by building something new. And so when you take those two factors together, it really drives how much more an organization needs to have in the physical structure to be able to service the clientele that they have.
And what are some disadvantages, or when can you rely too heavily on one? How do you get in trouble by doing that, or how do you pick which approach?
Yeah, it is interesting. I think most of the organizations, because of some of the financial constraints, have really gone away from the design-based master plan. That was more based on kind of older thinking about providing a monolith, if you will, to a CEO as he finished out his career at a location. And we've really transitioned much more to the statistical analysis, if you will, of what the needs of the organization are that will
or the needs
drive
the community will be.
the needs of thank you so much. Yes, the needs of the community, to be able to match the needs of the community with the financial needs of the organization.
And blending all of that.
Yeah, I think it also matters where the organization is in its development. They may think they have a high-level strategy, but it doesn't necessarily translate down into tactical, the ability to achieve anything tactically. And so there's a need to translate a lot of those high-level organizational strategies into looking at the data, looking at the market, looking at the things that are out there, and then getting into the design opportunities. I look at it as sort of like a sliding scale. You've got the volume-based, the data, the market-based on one side, and you've got the design-based on the other. And most organizations will fit somewhere along the continuum. And we'll talk a little bit about the partners and how you kind of identify the right partners. But that's where making sure you have the right people helping you at the right times is critically important.
Where does asset baseline fall into this process? What does it actually look like in practice?
Yeah, this is an area where I feel is critically important and often overlooked by executive leaders. I talked about it, and when you think about master planning, you do want to think about what's that next big thing. And the less sexy part of it is, what would that look like? What does our existing infrastructure look like? Where are we today? What are our gaps? Where do we have opportunities, and where do we have risks that we should be concerned about?
Transparent audit of what's
Right.
existing, what's going on.
Yeah, because, organizations tend to, again, we're talking about leaders who weren't facility leaders, right? They're not behind the scenes looking at the infrastructure of older buildings. And when the way I look at it is I look at it as like a three-level approach. The first level is, what do the infrastructure look like that we have today? Where are the gaps and the risks? How do we analyze that and make sure that we are looking at the investments that are going to be needed into that infrastructure to keep the operations going? Because the most critical thing is keeping operations going. The second is looking at the capacity constraints that an organization has, the utilization of that space, and what does that lend us to? And then the third part is really the operations. Is it effectively being operated? And when you overlay these things, I've always told my teams, like, I think of them as like heat map. And when you overlay these things, what you do is you get a pattern that starts to emerge about certain assets in the portfolio that aren't performing. And in those cases, a lot of times the master plan should be focused as much on repurposing assets, maybe exiting an exit strategy for those assets, redevelopment opportunities. Not necessarily the thing that people want to hear, but when done correctly, organizations do want to listen to that because they don't want an impact to their operations down the line.
Right.
And Judd, you're exactly right, because what you see in an organization is they have a certain amount of capital capacity to be able to build new buildings. They think, okay, we're going to take that entire capital stack and be able to put new buildings in place, when in reality what they need to do is price out the infrastructure requirements for those buildings first, taking into account the risks associated with it, and in effect deducting out how much that's going to cost before they can really look at building new.
Yeah, absolutely. And then what that does is, like I mentioned earlier, is the organizations go in thinking they're going to achieve A, B, and C, and that then begins to it's the very beginning of showcasing an organization that they need to be open to reprioritizing as they go through, because things develop throughout the life cycle of the master plan that make the capital reprioritization need to occur. And so it's a constantly evolving process as you go through, and making sure that organizations understand the impacts and that they're getting the best bang for the sometimes minimal capital that they have to spend.
Yep.
So risk mitigation is something in our industry we talk about constantly, but when we're talking about really making infrastructure risk conversations land with leadership, especially the leadership that might not have the background or the expertise that our teams do, how do you make that land? What are those conversations actually like?
Yeah, this can be very tricky, and it was in one organization where we did a number of studies showcasing just the risk that we had in a specific building. Through those multiple studies, they didn't really land, and so simplifying it goes back to the conversation about who are your leaders, what language do they speak, and then making sure that you're translating it very simply to some extent.
It's just translating, right? It's that language translation.
Yeah. I mean, if you're a nurse, and you don't see behind the scenes, number one, you don't see it, and number two, you wouldn't be able to understand it probably if you go in there. But if they understand what it serves, that air handling unit or that electrical gear and the risks of it, it starts to get everybody on the same page.
Well, because they shouldn't have to understand. That's not their day-to-day. They're taking care of patients, or they're running the organization from the C-suite. Like, they shouldn't have to know that. That's why
they got us.
Yeah.
There you guys go. So jumping ahead a little bit here, in terms of planning for maximum entitlements, if you know you're not necessarily going to build it all, why are we planning for it?
When you have a greenfield or brownfield site and you're starting to look at master planning that, and you really want to look at maximizing the entitlements that you have there, because exactly what you're talking about, Judd, the flexibility associated with what's going to happen. I had a 150-acre site that we were looking at. We master planned that site for about 4.4 million square feet of build out. The ultimate build out, it's about 90% done, is actually much less than that. But what we were able to do was provide maximum flexibility within the construct of that 150 acres to be able to do some of the things that they did that they would otherwise not be able to do. Even though it wasn't maximizing the square footage, it was maximizing the flexibility. I have another example that is based on being in a downtown environment where the client was looking to maximize the entitlements for an entire city block to be able to build a new hospital bed tower. In that instance, they looked at the footprint of the building and tried to maximize that all the way up to the maxing out the entitlements. What they didn't realize was that the form and function, the requirements of what they were building, didn't really drive the entire usage of that footprint. Think of it from a hospital bed tower as a podium, and then a bed tower. And what they ended up developing was something that was very inefficient in the upper floors where the bed tower was, where the beds were, because they had too much space because they were trying to maximize the square footage that they had available to them. At the podium level, it made complete sense. At the bed tower level, they really should have stepped that back, and it would have gotten a much more efficient building.
Yeah, I think it's important to understand that organizational strategy changes. Where I work now, our organizational strategy has changed because of some of the regulatory changes that have been required from our partners at the state level. We needed the ability to maneuver within, and luckily for us, we had done a kind of a long range specific plan with the cities in which we operate, and we were able to kind of change our strategy a bit. And I think that's just one example.
So that is a great note to end on. I'm going to pause you guys there because I want to dive in to the importance of keeping master planning flexible. Like, subscribe. If you want to catch part 2, make sure you do that. And we'll be back with more in just a little bit. Thank you.
Check back in a few weeks as we continue our conversation on healthcare facility master planning with Bill Foulkes and Judd Orlando. And don't forget to subscribe to the Construction Insiders podcast so you're notified as soon as new episodes go live.